subject. Lack of revolutionary intent and energy in the city, in city affairs, and laical matters, Picking up a bit from last time, since this would come up to some people's consciousness, and they might ponder this, let me go ahead and work on it. Is that on the 3D level, which may appear unquestionably to be in some way good or progressive, is still ultimately 2D related, TWO, to be of any real use to the revolution. Now, if you recall last time I was mentioning that all change was good if you could see it, no matter that it might appear to ordinary sight to be undeniably inhumane, apparently destructive at our level, etc. And this is, if there was such a thing, sort of the other side of the coin tonight. That there does appear to be in life things that seem to be good. The building of hospitals, people doing charitable acts. You can look around and find almost anywhere that you look from a certain view, things that would appear to be just out in the ordinary flow of life would appear to be progressive, would appear to be good stuff. But everything at the 3D level is 2 TWO, is 2D related to be of any real use. It is 2D related actually to fit into a definition of a creative force or power for any of your usage. And the reason I bring this out, several reasons. One, by now you should know through your own experience, through looking back in the history of your own nervous system, through what has happened now from a new view, that back in the city you can attempt to do charitable acts. You could have attempted to pursue your forefathers' religion. You attempted to do that which someone else, some other organization said would be good, would be proper, would lead you into beneficial acts, ultimately into beneficial effects. And you should know that it was never that simple, to say the very least. When you're dealing with the triaxial moves, you're always dealing with the forces being arranged in such a way that they are helping support the status quo. Now, the difficult place, number two, of seeing how supporting the status quo and things apparently at the ordinary level back in the city, oftentimes being a part of some good move, some humane move, is somewhere in the crack between the status quo and that which may appear to be progressive action, is the fact that the change that is visible, the change that is discussable, the change that is experiential to ordinary people is always too slow, to frighten the people. That if you could see it in a certain way back in the city, too slow would be synonymous with change. Now that's from a revolutionary viewpoint. Back in the city, continually, as you should know, to the people, change is always right on the verge of being completely out of control. You get past the age of 20, especially 30, especially 40, if you've got any group of people that would listen to you, if you had any market to write your social criticism, what is the heart of it? It's always that things are changing too quickly. And if a social writer, that is, a molecular part of life's body in charge of writing social critiques, if he or she starts out saying, change may be all well and good, but change too quickly, ... you don't have to read any further. You know it's going to be a criticism. If it's going to say change in some areas of human experience and human culture obviously is called for at this time. But when such change seems to be out of control, you don't have to read anymore. When, as they say, if change seems to be going ever too fast, you do know, you don't have to look to the next paragraph, you do know that that writer is not about to say something good about the change. They are then driven into making note of specific areas of how art, how social change, how political change specifically is not for the best interest of everyone. And yet, what they're pointing out without realizing it, and what people accept it as being without analyzing it in this way, is the major criticism, the base of the criticism, the base of the attack is not on the specifics. It's on the basis that it's too fucking fast. Now that would not, to ordinary consciousness, be sufficient. You could not get a reputation as being a social commentator if your criticism of change, music, dance, politics, everything, family life, if your criticism was simply this, that, hey, it's going too fast. Thank you, and end of article. You've got to say, why? You've got to say, well, this change here may be beneficial to few with vested interest, but over the long run, blah, blah, blah. It is D-centered, it is too D-related, and the normally unrecognized heart of it is that change itself is going too fast. So these critics, those that would even deny that they're critics and just say that they're social observers, I want you to see, are defending the status quo. They are, in fact, working as much for D as they would be for C. No one is strictly working for one force or the other, since there is not simply one force or the other. But even when someone apparently is making a positive comment, if someone says, our culture in the last decade has undergone great positive change, there is more social justice now than there was 10 years ago, blah, blah, blah. And it may sound as though the person has made a positive comment. They may sound as though, if you want another way, that the person has made a comment, an observation based upon positive activities that have taken place in the city. But all you got to do is listen a little. If it goes no further than what I said, that is not really a positive comment. The unspoken part, at the very least, is always that these changes were pretty good. But the unspoken part, at the very least, is they're pretty good, and they were that close to overdoing it. It almost went too fast. If you can't see it that way, you should be able to feel it from your own consciousness. If you were back in the city, if you were back at line level consciousness reading such matters or hearing someone make a comment on how a particular group or how your culture or your society had made positive change in the last few years, there would be in your nervous system a continuing guard at the gate of awareness, always ready to comment, always ready to try and find a governor to turn on, to drag your heels, to at least finish up their comment about, yes, apparently some progress has been made, and then your own voices say such things as, and it scared the hell out of me because I thought that these social changes were about to tear down the temples and burn up the Reichstag and kill us all. There is that feeling inherent in everyone in the city, whether they are professional writers, whether they are social commentators. That feeling is in the DNA, is in the patterns of everyone in the city, that all change is dangerous because it's always on the verge of being too much. That it's just a miracle that any change takes place without killing all of us. That you got to watch it. And it's just thankfully that we can turn around to some decade or to some area of change and go, phew, we only lost 20 people. We only burnt down 2 cities. And it seems to be over for the time being. And apparently, at the very least, when a seemingly positive comment is made, this unspoken comment is in everybody in the city of, Jesus, it's a miracle we didn't blow ourselves up. God, am I glad that episode is over. It is always on the verge of being too quick. On that basis, to an individual attempting to do something extraordinary, to do something revolutionary, too slow is the name of all change. If it were not, there would not be activities such as this. If the rate of possible change out in life were enough, all religions, any religion would be all right. Almost any book you could find, put together with your own insight, intelligence, and understanding would have been enough. The good old phrase back in the city that time cures everything. That may be true. Who's got the time to find out? Another way you can look at it is back in the city, that change should also be called conservative change. Always. But to the revolutionary, another old proverb or truism comes to mind of people saying that time is of the essence. For a revolutionary, time is not of the essence. Time is the essence. Time is the heart of the essence of things. The time is not something to fool around with. Not real time. Not time as being a full dimensional partner. To cityfied consciousness, change would appear to be a very straightforward and simple matter. And it's always dangerous. It's always on the verge of being too radical. It is always on the verge of moving too quickly. And to the cityfied way of looking at it, change, to be proper, useful change, has got to be conservative change. It has got to be gradual. It has got to be orderly. And out in the bushes, this whole matter is laughable. Well, once you see it, if I wanted to fall back in myself to 3D conversation, I could say out in the bushes, it would be laughable if it weren't so pitiful. And by that I mean so pitiful that look at the length of time that you spent dealing around with conservative change, with orderly change, attempted gradual reform. Not that many of you still are not employed part-time with those fuckers. But back in the city, it appears to be a very simple matter. There are no ideas of triaxial dances. There are hardly any ideas of two people dancing. And it's all people can do. Those that appear to be the most philosophically inclined, it's all they can do to grasp such crude ideas as yin-yang. Two things. And it seems as though everybody on this planet that you can point out, hey, at least nowadays you could say, the world is run by yin-yang. And most people go, yeah, how about it? All right. But they can't even remember that. They can't remember. I mean, if you tell them philosophically, there has to be two sides to everything. Yeah, hey, all right. But they don't see that there's two sides when they say, well, what I want, other people don't want me to have. They don't see that you couldn't want anything unless there are other people wanting the same thing. They don't realize that you couldn't have any desires unless there are other people that had conflicting desires. They don't realize that you never could get something, this one thing, unless there's a whole bunch of other people trying to keep you from getting it. In other words, at ordinary level, you know this. You can sit here and nod and laugh along with me when I start going way off into God knows what dimensions. But ordinarily, in the city, you can't even keep hold of the fact that, at least in California, if not everywhere, it's yin-yang. Yeah, yeah, right on, right on, right on. And 2 seconds later, nobody remembers that. Life is a complex chemical arrangement. Man is not a simple matter. He is a chemically complex part of an even more chemically complex host, that which I have referred to you by the name of life. Along similar lines, a few more things from last time. Let me pull into it. That I mentioned to you that to correctly start, much less support, a revolution, you must have a proper combination of force, that is action, and planning, thinking of action. I mentioned that and said a few words about it last time, and that might appear to be absolutely obvious. Or even back months ago when I first brought out and pointed to you that humans, among other creatures, singularly among other creatures here on the 3D level, have the ability to do two things, to act and to think about acting, and that's it. That everything that seems to be a transfer of energy, that is, something that seems to impress them, something that seems to affect a human, in return the person either acts or they think about acting. So, you might say that it would be obvious that I am just embellishing it, expanding on it a bit, to point out that the revolution itself, the kind of extraordinary activity that this kind of stuff may be, would certainly, obviously require a certain combination, a going out of business grand opening sale, combination of action and thinking of action, force and planning, that it has to be. Right? Well, you had several days to consider, well, you'd never consider this, so here we go. The revolution has got to have a certain combination of force and planning. But, believe it or not, get ready, believe it or not, the revolutionists would know that buying 3D large, planning has almost no effect or relationship to the ultimate action. And yet planning must be done or the action won't ever come off right. Did I butcher the sentence too much? The revolutionist knows what I've always stated, that to get the rebellion off the ground and to support it has got to be the proper combination of planning and action. And yet he knows that buying 3D large, buying large in the 3D world then, that planning has almost no effect on, has almost no relationship to the ultimate action. And yet, had the planning not taken place, the action would have never come off right. I think at least the kid understands why I threw in at the beginning, believe it or not. Because 3D-wise, this is absolutely rational. to say that you've got to have a combination of two factors, and then to say that one of them has no ultimate effect on the outcome, and yet had it not been taken into account, had it not been pursued, the outcome would not have been the same. Now, if any of you had, on your own, when some of you have, but if you can pull it all together right quick, how about the one I threw out many, many moons ago about consciousness is the last to know? Does anybody get a feel for the fact that you have got to plan and you have got to act? If it were not for the sake of that there had to be some planning, then this kind of activity would not entail someone like me even ostensibly conveying some kind of new info, new ideas, new words, new terms, new verbal picturizations. There would not be the kind of little task, etc. So there has got to be planning. There's got to be planning. If you got no aim, you don't know what to do. If you got no map, you got nowhere to go. So there's got to be planning. But also, everyone knows this, whether you like it or not. Planning forever is not going to get the revolution off the ground. Planning forever is not even going to put food in your mouth. So there's got to be the proper combination of planning and action. And yet, in this activity, maybe I shouldn't say in everything, just try and get the blues a little bit at a time. Try and get shocked a little bit at a time. That from a certain view, this revolutionary activity, the outcome, the getting it started, the supporting of it, that is, the ultimate action of it, could be said to not even be affected by the planning for it. That the ultimate action that one must do has almost no relationship to what the plans were. I admit again, verbally, this is the height of sophistry. But think about it real quick. Try and pull your molecules together right through, you know where, some of you. Think about the extraordinary things apparently you've done. Now, you may have believed that you were planning for it, but think right quick. It's probably too late now. I don't hear enough reaction. Nobody's getting it. To what you ultimately did, what you ultimately apparently did, if you could see it in a certain way, it's not what you were planning for. But if you had not planned, you'd just be a weekend mystic. You'd just be sitting around, hoping, as they used to call it, on the law of averages catching up with you, that someday, it's like God sits around in the great paradise outside of this system, and just whenever he gets a chance and for fun, he has one of these machines that randomly dials numbers on Earth. And that one day, just the law of averages are going to catch up, and you're going to pick up the phone and say hello, and he's going to say, "This is God. What can I tell you?" And you're going to think, it happened. For the kind of proper action to ever occur, you have got to properly plan in a revolutionary sense. But I am telling you, and a lot of you have had this experience, but we got the wrong time of the month. I put it wrong, you heard it wrong, it's still too complicated because I did not feel any particular reaction. But a whole handful of you have experienced this already. That you had made plans, you thought you understood something, things I'd said, you thought that you had your own understanding, that you were moving along a certain line, that you were making some kind of, what shall we say, gradual progress toward change. The plan seemed to be even paying off. Yes, I seem to be making little bitty steps. As some other people used to say about that long journey has begun with but one single step. You should also remember one of the unidentified flying never said about that. But you believe I am making little bitty steps. I'm on the way. Planning is paying off. And yet when there seems to be, in your case, in some instance there seems to be an ultimate action. Something happened that seemed to be a payoff that you were looking for. If you could see it right quick, either then or now, the planning had almost no relationship. It had almost no effect in the 3D world of apparent cause and effect. And yet, if you do not plan in this proper way, the action will never be forthcoming. What can you make of that? Of course, if you're ordinary, what you make of that is, let me out of here. Well, perhaps another time I'll come back. I was, you could say, prepared to press on almost the rest of the evening on that, but I see that I could be pressing on buttons made out of tofu, if not jelly. So I guess I'll either come back to it sometime or forget it. But you shouldn't forget it. Next subject. The me's, the M-E plurals. Back to an area that at first may seem more familiar to everyone. Yet another investigation of what seems to be your internal universe. Now, everyone seems to have, now I'm not just playing with words tonight, so listen specifically. I have a reason. I was going to, if I don't stop in the middle of this, to expand into another area, at least one more. So I'm not simply playing with words when I start this. Everyone seems to have an I, that you feel I, you say the word I, that seems to be a general spokesman for you. But the operations of the city itself, the operation of the people's institutions, are performed by the two me's. Not I, the two me's. Now we're back to man, the binary animal. We're back to like yin and yang. And as popular as that is now, I have threatened, a little aside I guess, that's going to come up because there are times that I need to encourage you, as I said, to even apply yourself to just looking at the binary nature, that you don't even consider that, much less trying to follow me into 3D and God help us, 3.5D and 4D worlds. But yin and yang, it's like talking about capital letter G God and other stuff. And so I thought about coming up with just a new phrase, if nothing else, so that people wouldn't get hung up. I thought of ping pong. But I'm like you, I kind of laughed, and that was a cheap shot, so I bypassed that. And the next thing I thought about was we should have, since yin and yang, I remember that one of the definitions is supposed to be, or one of the descriptions is supposed to be the masculine and the feminine side of life and people and creation. So I thought instead of, if it's going to be that one representation, I thought about going ahead for actual names. Instead of yin/yang, is like have Abe and Annie. Ernst and Edna. Ernst and Edner, it should be. But anyway, back to our great world of man, the binary creature. Now, everyone is aware, all of you are aware, from your own, in your life, contemporary times, your knowledge of history. It should be some of your own now molecular reckoning, genetic memory in your own nervous system of all these great divisions that seem to run a spectrum from worldly philosophers to religious thinkers to social observers. This great division of man internally, what seems to be in some way his real essence, what he is in here, whether he understands it properly or not, is that everybody, including the people, including the street sweepers and everybody else, they don't have to wax philosophically, but we all know these great divisions of man being divided into a physical self and a psychological self, into the spirit and the flesh, into the carnal and the divine, being a conscious part and an unconscious part, being a secular part, a sacred part, being a profane part, being a pure part, a personal part and a cultural part, a higher part and a lower part, a real part, since I've been on that, and a pretend part. I guess I about covered the history of these divisions. I bring it up to remind you again, and you could sit there, it might be interesting sometime for you to think up your own. I stopped, I could think up even more, but they're not only in history books, they're not only in religious books, they're not only in psychology books nowadays, they are in general human awareness. It is an accepted reality, as I was using a few weeks back, that people believe, no matter their terms, most people, even religious people, if they did not take me as being involved with a clerical attack, would agree with my terms, my description a few weeks back, that everyone feels as though there's a real me in here and then there's a pretend me. You should have a continuing awareness of that, but now I'm going to sketch for you some new pictures. That being, and listen, this is the way people work. I'm using the English language, and so it's apropos for us, and you're the only ones I'm talking to right now. It's the me's, and there are two me's. I could call it me and then the other me. I've got another name for the other me I'll tell you in a minute I started to use. One me, the me, seems to be civil. I guess you could say the good me or the better me, but it seems to be civil. And it feels as though it should be dominating the other me. And this me feels guilty when it doesn't dominate the other me. When it forgets to, when it seems to be too weak to, whatever would appear to be the circumstance, when it is not, when it seems to come to its attention that it is not dominating the other me, it feels guilty. At the second one, I said I could just call the other me, but I was tempted to call it the Bubba me. This other me, compared to the first one, which we have to do verbally, is uncouth. And it seems to be an aspect in everyone, this other me, seems to be an aspect of one that should be conquered, overcome, and just banished, if not reformed. Now think about it. There seems to be an I that's a general spokesman for everybody, but when you think to yourself, when you speak, it's always on the basis not of I, it's on me. And there are two me's in there, two distinct me's. As I mentioned, I know that I have been over similar areas on numerous occasions, but there are three real distinct ways in which to study this area that is profitable. That is the apparent division in man. And one is the study of the reality of the division itself. that it is not an illusion, it is not an internal quirk of one's psychological insight. The division is there. It is worldwide. It changes in its apparent intensity as you go from less civilized areas to more civilized areas. As you go from areas where people are still predominantly involved in working in the lower stories of life's factory to those where they're working in the higher stories. But the spectrum remains, the connections remain, and the division is there. That is the first importance. It's not just for me bringing you up periodically that you may by now say, yeah, that's true, yeah, that's true. But you thought there was some division in humanity before you met me. At the very least, most of you at your age, you believe that, yeah, inside I got a conscious mind and conscious motivations, now I got those unconscious ones. Because that is a genetic truth now, in certain neighborhoods at least, back in the city. And it's almost reached all neighborhoods back in the city. That is, the entire planet, the entire race of man. But all of you, in your own way, you had already, since it is worldwide, you had already accepted the fact, you had faced up to the truth that there was such a division in you. But that was not any sort of understanding, that was not any sort of knowledge. You were born with that genetic information. That was of no more importance to you than being able to look in the mirror and say, nose, ear, me. It's of no importance. If you were born with it, you can't use it. It's not revolutionary information. It's relevant. And the only kind of information that the real revolutionist can use, he's got to be able to say, if it's not irrelevant, don't bother me with it. If it's not irrelevant, it's of no interest. If it's not irrelevant, it is certainly of no value. So you have got to, as it were, rediscover America. You have got to rediscover, in a certain way, the reality of this division. Secondly, what I was going to point out of one of the ways in which to use this, to study it, is the apparent human ramifications of the division. How religions have used it, such as man being the carnal and the spiritual, man being the profane and the divine, man being the worldly in here, plus simultaneously the celestial, and all that stuff. All the way from that to we all have conscious motivations, thoughts, desires, and unconscious ones, and there the twain shall meet. As the study of the potential, how it is manifesting itself, the human ramifications of this division. And thirdly, is back to our grand old question as to why life so raises man. Why life has within itself man, from one dimensional view, being created in this binary condition with this internal division, and him having an awareness of it. Or if you want to get real sticky, that man has an awareness that he is a binary being, which of course is simply an imperfect reflection of something else, something more complex. The two me's. In a sense, you could almost look at it as an attempted dual monarchy. It's like the king and his brother-in-law. It's like two kings trying to rule simultaneously. And whichever one at any particular time that you feel like is me, if you've got the wherewithal and the need to do this, it is not difficult at all. It's just difficult to remember, and it's difficult to hold on to any awareness of it. That whatever king seems to be sitting on the throne right then, or have the scepter in his hand, and seems to be me right now, there is lurking somewhere in the throne room, behind the throne, behind the screen somewhere with a kid. Maybe he's in the regal toilet. But there is this other one, and there is a struggle going on. And everyone is born feeling as though one of the me's is civil. One of the me's is more what I should be. And ordinary people, if they were to question it, if it were brought out to them that was worthy of any investigation, they would, of course, attribute this me to my upbringing, to the effects of my religion. It is the me to which we should all, or at least me, but to which we should all aspire. I should be the me, not the other me, not the bubble me. I should be this me. Everybody's born with that. Now, of course, some people believe that the me I should be is a Jew me. Others believe I should be a Christian me. Others believe I should be a secular humanist me. Other people believe I should be a Buddhist me, and so on. That is the me that feels to be the good one, the decent one, the civil one. And as I said, there is some importance to this, some practical significance to it. Everyone assumes that they have acquired this after birth. That the reason I have a feeling, an inclination, well, at the very least, an awareness of what would be a proper person, a proper me, is thank God for my dear white-haired mother. Thank God for the dear old white-haired priest. Some sort of influence, and the influence is simply the continuing broadcast from the secret station of WDNA. But along with that me, then seems to be the other me. And with ordinary people, if this was pointed out, they would say the other me then is the me that does not want to be a good Muslim. It's the me that does not want to be charitable. It's the me that certainly doesn't want to fast from sun up to sunset 30 fucking days every year, and I don't have to get over there with all that crowd over in Mecca. You know, other than that, I don't mind being a Muslim, since all my neighbors are Muslim, my family is Muslim. But Jesus, plus, God, I'd give anything for a drink, and here I'm surrounded by a whole country full of teetotalers. That person, if they were asked, it was pointed out, they would attribute this side to being the anti-God influenced me. The devil influenced me. The carnal me. The worldly me. The me that is far from Allah. The me that is far from the name, the true name of Abdullah. I'm far from being a slave to God. I am a slave to worldly, sensual, sinful urges. Well, of course, now, not I, and not really me, it's the other me. But they would attribute that, if it was pointed out what I was getting at, in their own way, that it is still a byproduct of their culture, their upbringing, their teaching, their religion, and it's not. Everybody is born with two me's. Some people's me seems to be Jewish, some people's me seem to be Irish, some seem to be Catholic, some seem to be white, some seem to be black, some seem to be aggressive, and etc. But you are born with the me's. What they're called is of no consequence. And it is not true that the me's are taught, that the me's are raised and nurtured here in the city, here on the planet, here in your lifetime. Something else about me. Would you note that the noun me only exists linguistically in the past? You can't use me, you can't use it in the present. You can't say, as we all know, being the educated stuff that we are, yeah, people. Being the intelligent people that we are, you don't say, me going to drink this, me going out later. You do not, it is not Linguistically, me does not exist except in the past. And you don't say it in the future. You don't say me drinking this, and you don't say me will have one later. Me only exists linguistically in the past. Now, as always, I can manage to drag that into the bushes. Looked at another way, can you see that me's have no future? They do not exist in the future. Our language denies the use of it in the future. You do not say, me will undergo great change in the future. Me, I'm going to do a lot better. Me, I'm going to quit drinking. Me has no future tense. Linguistically, me does not exist in the future. Linguistically, me does not even exist in what linguistically would appear to be the present. To say, well, yes, me standing here, right now, me be here. It's I be here. There is no place in what appears to be now, much less in the future, for me. Isn't that strange, since I concocted all this, of how it kind of fits in and almost hints at maybe some more subtle mystical message? Kids said it was a little strange. The dual monarchy I mentioned, the two me's in everybody. You could look also at their activity. It'd be like somebody with a peg leg attempting to dance the Cotton-Eye Joe or even the tango, and the peg leg is in a knothole. And you can dance all you want to. But for that kind of dance, for that kind of human activity, to have any extraordinary meaning, the real revolutionist has got to bring in and support a third factor, a third force, another pretender to the throne. Without that, you're left with me. You're left with two me's, and you're left with one me that seems to be civil, one me that seems to be the one that you personally should listen to, that you should follow, and there seems to be the other me, the Bubba me, the one that is undesirable, the one that is uncouth, the one that obviously should be dominated by the first me, and it cannot be subdued, it cannot be reformed satisfactorily, and the first me suffers from it, commonly referred to as guilt, which of course, as you all know, is another synonym for grow you bastard. Well, all right, mechanically grow you bastard. Oh, it works. Before I go on to the wonderful world of sports, we'll turn the tape over. There is a, to say the very least, continuing danger that all of you should be aware of. I'll point out one more time tonight, of taking much of this, all of this, on some nights all of it, as being some kind of verbal performance. That some of the ideas sound intriguing, cute, a little funny, but such things as the me's, having two me's. I don't sit around and write this stuff. I don't sit around and concoct this. I don't sit around with any great plan to come up with whole new pictures every week or every time we meet. And it is not for the sake of always having, at least superficially, something new to say, some new term, some new description. If it were not of some practical value, even if it only lasted an hour, under right conditions, if it only lasted for a split second, that you were out running tomorrow, We're walking down the stairs tonight after we get through meeting. And in you, somewhere, it happens, not just my words, not just the descriptions, but it was something slightly altered from the normal information available in the city. That beyond the general sensation, and it's reflected in speech in general, of I, that almost seems to be an encompassing umbrella, seems to be a general spokesman for everybody just under general conditions. Then when it seems as though it's really, personally, important to you, that you're out running, walking along, just staying there, having a cup of coffee, looking off, and all the things you might be thinking about, all the plans you might be apparently making, all the past occurrences that you're suddenly replaying. You might even be apparently thinking about matters related to this. There are two distinct me's in everybody, and the me's can think about this. They can think about anything. They operate the ordinary functions of the people. Back in the city, the me's run everything. The me's are on the throne. They run the press, they run the church, they run the banks, they run the military. The me's run everybody. And there is something of real value, as I said, it might not last that long. But it is new, the reality of it, to anything that you have been dealing with if you find a way to use it. Without me having to always say that this is something, even though it may sound vaguely familiar, it may sound as though it is next door to something I had already said, there is a reality that is not normally plotted, that is not normally discussed, that there is within everybody two me's that you can feel. You didn't acquire them, they're not put upon you after birth, they're not an accident, they're not a mistake, and they feel as though they're both pretenders to a throne. And then there is a sensation, as opposed to those, it just seems to kind of be an I. But these two me's are the ones that are running everything. And to a very distinct point, they are in conflict. It's as though it is a dual monarchy. It is as though they are brothers. And one of them seems to be civil, intelligent, decent, may hold some promise. And the other one seems to be the epitome of Bubba, uncouth, unkempt, very little future, always on the verge of getting out of hand, if not actually getting out of hand. But that feeling is in everybody, all over this world. It's not just a verbal game I'm playing. But since I promised sports, while I was, although not planning, seemed to be having these messages, seemed to be thinking along the lines, seemed to be thinking along the line. I just hadn't said that in years. Seemed to be thinking along the line of the me's. Another picture came to mind. The me's as baseball players. Life in the city as being a baseball player. Not a football, not a basketball, a baseball player. Because it is that everyone back in the city is born on a team, and everyone is born to a position. Really, you're born on a team. You're born in uniform. If you doubt it, look down. Several ways I can describe it. Look at the color of your skin. Look down your pants at your naughty parts. Look at your height. Look at your hair color. Look at your bone size. It's all part of your uniform. You were born on a team. That's it. And you were born, a lot of people might be able to accept that, but you were born by God to a position. You were born to be shortstop. That's it. So, trust me, or at least follow me. The me's are as though they're baseball players. Or two me's make up one baseball player somewhere. A man or woman born on a team, born to a position. After about the age of 20, to cover all contingencies, after the age of majority, whatever it is in any particular case. And there is something, I've mentioned that in several ways before, but after the age of majority, some things happen. There is something, I've mentioned that in several ways before, but after the age of majority, some things happen. Everyone finds himself on a minor league team. Now, any of you who are not great sports fans, it's not going to get very complicated. But the major league teams, one you hear about, the Giants, the Reds, and the Cardinals, all that. Under that, they all have what is known as farm system in the smaller cities, into Richmond and Knoxville, and Augusta, Barstow, Fort Lee, Coconut Grove. It's the minor leagues, not the big leagues, it's the minor leagues. And those of you who are more interested in sports than I am, I do know that this is not absolutely true, what I was about to say, that some of the use of the minor leagues is to help season and give experience to younger players, but that's really beside the point. The minor leagues really are supported by those that are over the hill. Players, the coaches, or guys that's retired or washed out in the major leagues and they've been sent down there. Trust me. After the age of majority, everybody finds himself playing on a minor league team. It's true. So we don't just have to take my blanket statement. Let me point out a few other aspects of this. Now, the minor league teams, that is the teams in the city, capital C-I-T-Y, my city and my state. The one I've drawn you out the diagram for, the map of, and the one I've been talking about of late. In the city of man, in the ordinary state of everybody, the team is minor league. It's AAA ball. And in the minor leagues, these players, which is everybody after the age of majority, the players are mediocre enough just to be kept on the team. That is, just enough to be kept alive a while longer. Like everybody on the team, more or less, at best, maybe batting about 260, which nowadays will keep you in the major leagues, I guess, but about 260, and you're just a fair fielder. Everybody, not just you now, but you are everybody if you're in the city. You're mediocre enough just to be kept on the team. It's because the situation is, the talent available for the minor leagues is such that if they decided to strike you from the roster, your replacement, they know by now. Life knows your replacement is not going to be one whit better than you are. Your replacement might bat 263 for a while, but instead of 80 arrows a year, they'll have 85. Everybody is just mediocre enough just to hold on, just to stay there on the team, just to stay alive a few more days, a few more seasons. There is not enough energy, there is not enough enthusiasm on the minor league teams for the players to actually get out and practice anymore, to actually try and stay in shape. Because in these minor leagues I'm talking about, as I've said, it doesn't really matter. You're not in any individual danger of being struck from the roster tomorrow, because there are no hot shots waiting to take your place. You are as mediocre as whoever would replace you, and vice versa. The extent to which you evidently can cover your position has not improved since you reached the age of majority. Your enthusiasm for the game has gone downhill, if anything. But at best, it's simply leveled off, and you have settled for being the mediocre player that you are. But you're surrounded by it. That's the team. From a certain real view, to each person's teammates, to their family, even to the fans, you're a bum. I guess a lot of you are familiar enough with the baseball folklore and et cetera. It's just a common term, people in the stands hollering out. I don't know how it seems to be just limited to baseball. If somebody's always hollering out, "You bum." I don't recall ever hearing hockey players or lacrosse players shouted at called bums, but in baseball it's just like almost anybody can be a bum. But I mean something specifically. In the minor leagues, to the fans, that is everybody else, to your own teammates, to your family, everybody, we'll put it in quotation marks now, but everybody is a bum. Hitting about 260. They drop about, or bobble about 1 out of every 3 or 4 balls that are hit their way. Ultimately, of course, although the me's may not entertain it thought-wise, but the players themselves, at various times for the rest of their career, maybe it happens when somebody in the stand shouts it out, maybe when they realize that one of their family members or close friends feels that way, but periodically it is brought to their attention, and they feel, I'm a bum. The majority of the people, the majority of the players, of course, cannot, as things are chemically arranged, cannot live consistently with that kind of awareness. But the reason I'm pointing it out, it is no great secret. All these players, under the proper conditions, which are not all that strange, under the proper conditions, all players, all people, can be subject to, even from all the way from a friend or the family to a stranger in the stands hollering, "You bum." And for a split 3D second is the awareness that normally I'd turn back around and say something smart. But under certain conditions, somebody hollers, "You're a bum." And the feeling is, damn, they're right. I am a bum. I know what my batting average is. I know. And of course, it's gone. You cannot stay chemically at that level and function as part of the people. If you stay at that level, you become a part of one of the institutions of the people. You're not in the bell curve. You're not in the major neighborhoods of the city. You're not really fully functioning on the team anymore. You're sort of on the, what do they call it, it's a side roster where they put sick players, whatever they call it. You're on the reserved injured list. You may still be alive, but the majority, the team players, cannot function with a continuing chemical awareness that, yeah, I'm a bum. But the truth is, you have got to either be content with playing out the rest of your days in AAA ball, the minor leagues, or you have got to attempt to become a superstar, staying with sports terminology. Now, a superstar on a team is given certain leeway. If someone is attempting to become a superstar, the other teammates, in a sense, will forgive him or her for being self-centered, selfish, for trying. I was going to say trying harder, but from one view, for simply trying. That ordinary people the regular old AAA mediocre players, they are familiar with the appearance now and then of a hot dogger. The guy that's out there early. The guy's always wanting somebody, hit me some out here, let me practice my feeling. Throw me a few, let me take a little more batting practice. In fact, there was a baseball player that after he got past the age that I'm talking about in the external world, in the ordinary world, after he reached the age that he should have been, physiologically speaking, probably retired, he kept on. Always running at the edge, and they nicknamed him Charlie Hustle. It's like the superstar. It would only be Charlie Hustle. It would only be somebody striving to get out of the minor leagues that would remain fresh in the game, that would remain unbored by the game, because everybody else, after the age of 20, after the age of majority, it's become a job. It's the only job they know, the only team they know, the only uniform they know, the only position they've ever played. They can imagine playing another one. They generally don't even think about playing another position. It's just the same way that I am me, I am a shortstop. I am a shortstop with a green and purple uniform. It is only Charlie Hustle. It is only somebody still with a fresh feeling for the game. It is only somebody still attempting to do better. But they're past the age of majority. They're there on the team and they're surrounded by mediocre players. They are themselves naturally mediocre, like everybody around them. They have some awareness. I am not going to get fired because I'm at least as mediocre as the people around me. I'm at least as mediocre as those young Turks over there waiting to get on the team. I can stay here until they retire my number. That is, until the great Grim Reaper in the Casey Stengel mast strikes me off the list, calls me home to the great diamond in the sky. It's either that or I have got to attempt to get myself in better shape. I have got to do that, which is, in a real sense, unnecessary. Because I do not have to hit better to stay on the team. I don't have to feel better if I ELD. All I've got to do is wake up in the morning and breathe. If I put a mirror here and check and I'm still alive, I still got a job. I'm still on the team. Now I'm going to slide closer to something that I may or may not go into that I threatened some weeks back. To become a superstar, to try and not be mediocre, to try and get yourself out of the minor leagues, to try and make life meaningful, to try and be a part of the revolution, requires something very specific. And that is, you have got to look out for number one, to go along with my picturization, since I did use the cliche, we should here be saying, you got to look out for old number two, taking into consideration that you got two me's in there playing. You have got to look after yourself. Now this, and I'm not just playing words now, this is far removed from how life is wired up. The rest of the teams, everything in the city, all the way from real sports to religion, is wired up in another direction. You are not told that you can be a good Christian, Jew, or Buddhist only on the basis of look after yourself. Look after old number one. Need I have to point out much further, that flies absolutely in the face of all so-called spiritual philosophy to actual attempted spiritual practice. But to say the least, the time has come for me to at least mention it, and we'll see how much further I go, because I'm getting close to the area that I said that some of you, if I begin to tell you certain things just verbally, just standing here, some of you would be most distressed. Some of you would be so distressed that, as simple as I could put it, and I can put it real simply, some of you would not even hear it, which would be interesting in itself if you knew how to use it, to later for me to grab you and say, "Do you hear what I said?" Maybe even take a little piece of paper and I could write it out in maybe a minute or so. All nice, simple words, not self-contradictory, nice, simple, and say, "Do you read that? Did you hear me say that? Can you read it now and know what that says?" And be some of you go, "Ooh." At any rate, that is what I am at least getting closer to by telling you, you have got to look out for old number 2. You have got to. You have got to look out for old number 2, and you have got to simultaneously, at the very least, learn what it means to do so. Because to begin with, if I just left it at those terms, even though some of you would assume by now that I meant something else, if we just left it to the me's and you to hear it, it's not true. It can't be true. It can't be correct even. That is not the way to do something extraordinary. That is not the way to do this, even though I seem increasingly disinclined to call it anything in particular. Whatever it is, it's obviously good, creative, decent, at the very least. And so therefore it has got to be in some way, and it seems as though I've said it, that it's good for everybody. It's good for those around you. At least it won't harm them, but it seems to be good. I even point out that all change is good. That people like us, from one viewpoint, that life in some way is even dreaming of better change, faster change, and that's us. That anything creative that you do, anything that seems to be C-based that you do, even if it doesn't seem to have a conscious, observable effect in your life, and it may not, even life itself, be strong enough to have any observable effect, if life could observe such things, I have still more or less said it's good. We're helping life. That sounds real nice. I mean, it sounds like perhaps a New Age version of, if we were all good Jews, we'd be helping humanity. If we were all good Christians, we'd be pleasing God and helping even non-Christians. It all sounds decent. And this is not culturally acquired illusions, perceptions. It is wired into humanity. That in some way making good effort, making decent effort to improve oneself, to expand one's consciousness, anything that's ever been called would apparently be, in some sense, a charitable undertaking. From many ordinary views back in the city, it's only possible through charitable activities. Being humble in the two-dimensional sense of the word. Trying to make yourself appear to be in a lesser position on the field. It would appear to be anything but egocentric. But it's time, I got to tell you, you got to see it. You can't do this unless you look out for old number 2. Now, I'm talking about yourself. You got to know what that means, and you got to do it. Everybody in here, all of you on tape, all of you getting this on tape next week, all of you getting this on tape next year, or if it was here 5 years ago, later, I'm telling you, if you're hearing this 5 years from tonight, you don't know this. It is not natural. It seems even more unnatural if you believe you're involved with such activity as this. But it's a place that all of you will come to, and you'll try to avoid it. You'll believe it's some sort of river that must be spanned, that you got to learn to fly over it. You got to find some way around it. It may be a trap. It is everything to you, to the chemical consciousness of men, it is everything but what it is. And that is the need to look out for old number one, old number two. Until you understand what it means, and until you can correctly look out for old number two, look out for yourself, look out for I, not me, not the me's, look out for I, you cannot look out for anybody else. You cannot look out for anything else. That is, you cannot help people. All of you, at one time or the other, have wanted to help somebody since you've been involved with this. How could I help my mother? How could I help my brother? How could I perhaps help a friend of mine who I don't guess would ever be interested in joining up with something like this, but they're so close to me and they have some ability to think of unusual things. How could I help them? And based upon what seems to be the pressing feeling of closeness between you and some other team player, I have tried to give you helpful suggestions. It would seem to be helpful from your present view at that time, in your present field. But the reason that you cannot help anybody, and all of you should know this by now, that you can't really walk out suddenly and help somebody. I don't care who it is. The whole idea, the term itself is specious. You cannot help somebody. You cannot look out for somebody until you can look out for old number one. And this is not a play on words. This is not this kind of New Age or psycho-babble of saying things like, well, you can't love other people until you love yourself. Not that there's no validity in that, but I'm not simply giving you that kind of binary sloganeering. I'm telling you, until you have a correct understanding of what 3D, minimally, 3D selfishness is, a kind of so-called egocentric attitude. I'm talking about a secret kind that makes ordinary egoism. No, that's for children. That's for mediocre players. You got to be so selfish, so self-centered. Now, of course, this is not true. This is not a correct statement in the city, in the two-dimensional world. But I'm telling you to do this, you have got to be the most selfish, unfeeling, self-centered. It's almost that every breath you take, every thought you think is, how can I help me? Me. Me. Without that, you cannot look out for anyone, and I'm not even saying that's important. I'm just simply pointing out that's why you can't. You cannot look out for anyone, and you cannot look out for anything. Because it's the me's that keep wanting to learn. It's the me's that keep hoping, well, maybe some way, just accidentally, I'll get on a hitting streak tomorrow. Maybe some way I'll wake up in the morning and the glove fairy will have made like a magnetic field, and everything that's even hit within 20 feet of me, I can just close my eyes and I'll catch it. Maybe. Or if nothing else, maybe I can turn around to one of my teammates, one of the guys I know, second baseman, and say, hey, I believe if you'd choke up a little bit, you might hit better. You know, since I can't do any better, obviously, I'll help somebody else. There's a number of you people that are right at that point that is what, in a sense, in a very real sense, is stopping you from going any further. It's not a weakness on your part, and you're not misled. I have not led you into a dead end, but the times have never been right to bring this out to any great degree, and I may not do it to all of you tonight, but it's not going to hurt you to hear what I have already pointed out. But there's some of you that have reached the point that this is what has stopped you, that it's still your feeling that this, and there is some validity to this now. But when you're going to start escaping the velocity of this one position where you are and to go somewhere else, it ceases to be of any value to you. But it's still the kind of feeling that your effort here permeates, like the good old proverbial ripples in the pond, that the efforts you're trying to make are in some way actually tied to helping life itself, helping other people, that part of the way that you continue to grow is trying to be concerned about other people. And I've said that. I've even given tasks, even pointed out correct attitude is trying to turn your attention there and to find out it doesn't really make much of a difference what you plan to do in regards to other people. But there are a number of you that the time has come you have got to turn and look directly and realize, I'm telling you very simply and I'm telling you correctly, you've got to look out for old number 2. You've got to look out for you. And in a real sense, I'm not just saying this to be crude and profane, it's look after me and fuck everybody else. There comes a point, I'm of course being crude. Of course I'm so crude so often I guess it's losing its effect verbally. But it reaches a point in everybody that it's look after me. That right now I've got to be seen to. My ankle is sprained. My shoulder has been sore for the last 3 months. I can't even keep up a 260 hitting average. To hell with the team, to hell with the fans, and in many cases, you people, it's to hell with my family. I have done all I can. It's reached the point that I see the relationship between the team and the people in the stands. Amongst the teams themselves, the players, amongst my own family. I'm a bum. But the whole world's a bum. I have given you things about your family. I'm bringing this up because some of you get there and it helps stop you. It seems to be an aspect of you stopping. I have correctly pointed out that you have got to stop all of these imaginary inter-family squabbles with your family. That you just got to drop it, and I've given all of you in general and many of you individually things about your family. And I pointed out that your family is singular, that you've got to treat them in a way that's unique. And of course, if possible, I've encouraged that you have good blood relations with your blood kin. It's good. It's just good. But many people, it reaches a point that you have got to see that it's between right now. Right now, it's between me looking after me looking out for my best interest right now, and me staying involved with apparently looking out for the interests of my family. Goodbye. It's not as harsh as it sounds, of course, but that's the only way I can put it that's of any value right now. And I'm not saying that as a cop-out of some kind, that you may have to say, that's it. Seeing that big game in the sky, if they have one, and if we're there. But that is it. I'm saying this on the basis that there comes a point, whether this literally seems to take place in your life. I'm not trying to give any of you the imaginary blues, because it's not necessary that this become an overt situation based upon material circumstances between you and your family. They may not even have a distinct awareness of it, but there'll come a day that you may have to have the distinct awareness. I can no longer even worry about you people. It's not that I'm going to take away the worry, the concern, whatever you want to call it, up till now. But we now reach the point, I got to get back in shape. I got to start working out more. I got to get closer to superstar status, or I'm going to stay here in the fucking bush leagues the rest of my life. Which is strange, those of you who may know, they call the minor leagues the bush leagues. And so I had refrained up until this point of using that because of my own description of the bushes in the city. But isn't that interesting? That I'm either going to stay here in the minor leagues right now unless I start devoting more attention, unless I start devoting all the attention and energy I can find to me. And if it comes at the apparent expense of my apparent concern over my family, that's it. It doesn't stop the concern I had up to then. It doesn't stop. I'm having to use crude physical descriptions. If I'm in the habit of calling my family once a month, I'll keep doing that. If I'm in the habit of listening to my mother whine for 20 minutes before I say I got to go, I'll continue to do that. Maybe. But I am going to stop. I'm going to stop listening to any of the me's that even talk about it. I'll set up some kind of clock. I'll mark on the calendar when the time of the month is to call. And if a me starts talking about it before it's time to call, I'm not even going to listen. I'll call, and I may not even listen for the 20 minutes, but then I'll say, well, bye, Mom, see you next time. I'll hang up, and that's the end of it. No more energy, no more attention, no more involvement. I got better things to do. I got better people to look after. Me. I assure you I'm not being funny. There is a sense in which I can tell you that only the pushy are free. There's a sense in which I can point out to you that the blood only boils in battle and not in the victory. There's a way in which I could point out that the hormones are most active. The hormones most actively percolate in the chase, not in the capture. You have got to protect your revolutionary eye at all costs. At all costs. There is no exception to this. If there is an exception to your need for this. The revolutionary sense of I in you has got to be protected at any and all costs. For a long time, it doesn't seem to be of as much consequence, I guess, since I never mentioned it in this way. But once you begin to hear this, once there is something in your own team play amongst your own fans, your own family, within yourself, that this comes back to you, whether it's an hour from now or next week or next month, and you feel that I am being threatened, I am wasting energy. Conversely, the better way for me to at least verbalize it to you now is you begin to really feel the reality of what I'm saying. You've got to look after you. There is nobody, not your mother, not your children, there is nobody as important to the revolutionist as the damn revolutionist himself. And I assure you, if I must fall back into such childish asides, back at team level, back at the level of consciousness of the ordinary mediocre players, whoever was your imaginary hero, the Jesuses and the Moseses and the Buddhas and etc., that seemed to be the living epitome of what? Charity, grace, whatever terms they use. If those people existed like you imagine they do, if they were real revolutionists, I'm going to tell you what, they were not the nice guys you thought they were. Now, it's wired up into people. It's not a mistake of history. It is wired up in the general genetic memory of man that a Jesus, a Moses, a Buddha, it was just Mr. Nice Guy. They didn't want anything for themselves. By all accounts, they didn't own anything. They didn't try to beat people out of stuff. That their whole reason for living seemed to be to serve others. If they were at all what you imagine I'm telling you, that is a propaganda. That is a beautiful piece of propaganda. Because it's not true. A Moses did not get to be Moses without him looking out for number one. That was his reason for being alive. That was what made him Moses. That's what kept him from being a 260 batter. That's why you heard of him. That's why he existed. Of course, now you heard of him, it doesn't matter whether he existed or not, because now that you've heard of him, he did exist. Jesus did not get to be Jesus by saying such things as, forgive them, or whatever Jesus said, whatever you imagine he said, smiling, being the proper figure to be artistically portrayed on black velvet, looking off, being humble, feeding all the people. If there was a Jesus and he got to be a Jesus, he did it one way. The man, compared to 2D sight, was an egomaniac. He would have stepped on anybody, almost. I don't mean almost in a quantitative sense either. I want to remind you that 2D verbiage is not covering this. It is imperfect. But I'm telling you, in that sense, he would have stepped on anybody. He would have ignored anybody necessary. He would have let starve his own family. I'm telling you, he would have done anything, as imperfect as the words are, to keep him going toward being Jesus. Toward being Jesus Christ superstar. Now I think about it. Toward being Buddha superstar. We're running out of time, and so I guess you're spared again that I will not go any deeper into what I'm talking about, but I'll leave you with this one or two, you might consider them hints, what I'm getting close to. It is a kind of willful practice of chemical self-defense. It is the use of stuff that in the minor leagues is considered to be toxic waste. It's the use back in the city of the very things that the city's prophets, that is, their memory of Jesus, Moses, Buddha, Muhammad, Confucius, the very things that they apparently forbade, the very things that in you now seem to respond when you hear thou shalt not. And it seems, yes, that's true. That ain't true. It has to do with a kind of defensive aggression. It has to do with a kind of uninhibited but controlled emotional flow. It has to do, in a sense, of the chemical lab running wild. In the 2D and even the 3D world, it in toto has to do with this. Looking out for the old number 2. Looking out after me. Me. Sorry. I. The old number 2. Nobody else. Not even the me's that wanted to say that. It's looking out after the old number 2. Without that, there is nothing. Except adios buckaroos.
And Kyroots said, "Oh, all right, if you insist. I will admit that I do have a few more of the never nuggets. Maybe nourishment through the unexpected, the unproven, and the unprovoked. Sailing back into your neighborhood, if not your hearts, UFNs again."
Never try and hammer your swords into plowshares unless you are prepared to someday till your enemies to death.
Never back him into a corner and try to make a personnel manager admit his boy's a bum.
Never, I repeat, never, even as a joke, refer to a member of the judiciary as a sitting duck instead of a sitting judge.
Never borrow someone else's ideas. Unadorned theft is much cleaner and less confusing.
Never overlook the fact that you too can pronounce faux pas as fox pass if you know the secret.
Never hesitate to criticize something just because you have no idea what it means.
Never believe that you can't go home again. You can, assuming they haven't discovered what you stole last time you were there.
Never serve those cute little fruity drinks to guests who make their living in the sheet metal game.
Never get yourself all in a lather if some little group asks you to say a few words. Just say them. It doesn't really matter what you say, just say a few words.
Never fly on an airline who has the term cul-de-sac as its slogan.
Never overlook the possibility that everything ever said about you is true.
Never believe that appearances are deceiving. Appearances are not characteristics of things seen, but of sight itself.
Never read them if you plan to weep.
Never hesitate to buy or sell when the jig's up.
Never expect graduate credit for a course captioned Dismembered History.
Never just up and take off down the Amazon without at least notifying the Coast Guard, and never just up and take off on totally new thought patterns without first warning your present opinions and mindset.
Never trust anyone who looks like a police artist's sketch.
Never, no matter how pressing it may seem, let the problem of the idée fixée totally consume your attention.
Never believe in any theory developed by two or more people who never met.
Never have the time of your life, at least not all at once.
Never study war no more, but only if you're pretty darn sure no one else is either.
Never take advice from a dead man.
Never perish the thought unless you are absolutely sure you'll have another one.
Never go mountain climbing with a compulsive hand washer.